Felicia Bolton has followed this story for more than 2 years. She joins us now. Felicia, this is something that is amazing.
Yeah, it is, Aaron. The major break in Alice Almendarez's father's case surprisingly came from a Lifetime movie, not investigators. She calls this a real-life miracle, and she's hoping this new Texas law will be the missing link for thousands of families still waiting for answers. June 2002 was the last time Alice Almendarez saw her dad, John.
He sat in the backyard, watched us play, walked us around, walked us to the park, took me on bike rides. He would give me a pump. He was just a girl dad.
The father of 5 disappeared in Houston, Texas. After filing a missing persons report, the family searched for him for several days. Weeks turned to months, months turned to years, and still there were no clues as to where he could be.
To have someone just vanish off the face of the earth is the emptiest feeling ever.
Then one day, nearly 12 years later, Alice turned on the TV, and an ad in the credits of a Lifetime movie led her to a life-changing resource.
And that website was called Outpost for Hope, and that website basically is for people who fall off the grid. And on there was a link to Namus. I had never heard of Namus before.
Namus is the National Institute of Missing and Unidentified Persons System. It's an online database for missing, unidentified, and unclaimed person cases in the United States, fully funded by taxpayers' dollars through the Department of Justice, the Office of Justice Programs, and the National Institute of Justice. Medical examiners, coroners, and law enforcement officials from around the country can send over detailed case information for missing people, DNA of unidentified or unclaimed bodies, fingerprints and dental records for the unclaimed deceased, in hopes that Namus scientists will use their forensic technology and investigative team to solve the case. The program is currently managed by the University of North Texas Health Science Center in Fort Worth, just 4 hours north of Houston. And it's free for the public, law enforcement, medical examiners, and coroners to use. Officials see the back end of the site showing all information surrounding a case, while the public sees this. Just enough details to describe who a person could be and where they were last seen. When Alice looked online at the Namus website, she searched the database for unidentified bodies, and details for one unnamed man stood out.
It was an unidentified Hispanic male. Everything that, resembled that my dad had, his height, the approximate weight, and also the shirt that he was found in was a Houston Astros shirt. My dad was the biggest Houston Astros fan.
She contacted Namus, did a mouth swab, and sent her DNA to local officials, who sent off her test to Namus scientists. They ran her saliva against the DNA stored for that man. The process lasted 6 months, and the results prove that John Doe turned out to be her father, John Almendarez.
It saved us 11 and a half years if we would have known about Namus a long time ago.
She discovered Houston investigators found his body weeks after he was reported missing. His death ruled an accidental drowning. Police say he had no personal belongings or identification on him. Alice says he died near their neighborhood.
This is Buffalo Bayou in Houston, Texas. This is where my dad's body was found.
Everybody knew him as Johnny. Everybody in that neighborhood knew my dad.
2 years after police found his body, Harris County officials buried him in 2004 in a nameless grave just 10 miles from her childhood home.
Hey, Daddy. Before you would come here, it would say unidentified Hispanic male. So this is the first time that I've been able to come out here where it actually has his name on his grave.
And I went on my high school graduation. It was in 2004. And I asked, before my high school graduation, I would ask, do you have anyone here that matches his description? And they would tell me no. And all these years later, I found out that he was in the morgue that I was at asking for him the entire time.
Police had his missing persons report. The county had his body, but no one connected the dots between the two. Her story is one of thousands. According to Namus, 600,000 people go missing in the U.S. every year. As of July 2021, there are nearly 20,000 missing persons cases entered into the online public system. So far, Namus has helped resolve more than 5,000 missing, unidentified, and unclaimed persons cases. Despite the success, Namus officials say many law enforcement agencies are not using this free tool. It's a problem Almendares believed could be solved through legislation. So she turned her pain into purpose.
My dad's case was never taken seriously. It was reopened by Namus, entered into the Namus database. Our DNA was taken, and my father was linked to our DNA, and he was eventually identified 6 months later.
HB 1419 is finally passed.
This summer, the Texas Senate unanimously passed John and Joseph's Law, named after her father and another missing man discovered through the database. In June, Governor Greg Abbott signed that bill into law. Texas is now one of 11 states that requires all law enforcement agencies to enter data on missing persons cases into the online system. Some states give agencies 30 days to do so. Other state laws require 60 days, 90 days, or more.
The law enforcement, medical examiner, or coroner can enter missing, unidentified, or unclaimed. And I will say also for the missing person cases, even family members and victim advocates can make a primary entry into Namus. So a family member doesn't have to wait 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. They can enter that case into Namus themselves.
Namus Executive Director BJ Spalmer says they are in contact with several agencies to train them on the database. But without additional funding or staffing for the program, there is no practical way to provide oversight.
I think it's very important to have all of these cases in one central system to search and compare against one another. Of course, you also want to leave the local agencies with enough time to use their local resources before they enter into Namus, because fortunately, most of our missing persons are found alive and well.
Without a national law, Spalmer says there is no uniform system set in place to keep all agencies on the same page, a problem Alice hopes can be solved sooner than later.
There has to be some kind of law, some national law, not just a state law, a national law where all missing persons cases be taken seriously, put into a database, and after 30 days, DNA collected from family members. Otherwise, we're going to keep on with this silent disaster.
Namus officials say they are now seeing a backlog of cases and they will not be accepting requests for forensic services at this time. This change happening at the same time the contract with the University of North Texas Health Science Center ends this summer, and the new contract with nonprofit group RTI International in Chicago will begin this fall. Several officers I spoke to say the Namus program is a great tool, but without adding manpower to their department, it's unlikely they can keep up with the workload. Aaron?
Felicia, thank you.
In the 2 years I've spent investigating this Department of Justice program, I also found out many law enforcement officials don't even know the Namus database exists. For more than a decade, scientists have used this tool to crack nearly 5,000 cold cases. And for one North Carolina family in particular, Namus helped them solve a 20-year mystery crossing state lines. The search for her cousin, Angie Toller, led Nona Best down a path to helping others.
They will have to call my...
She's now the director of the North Carolina Center for Missing Persons. While ensuring other families find their loved ones, Best held on to hope that Angie would return one day.
She was 21 when she left.
Angie went missing in 1992 after she left her North Carolina home for a trip with her boyfriend. Days later, he came back, but she did not. Then in 2011, a clue appeared right in front of her face.
I was at a Namus training in Atlanta, and there was a coroner there from Maryland, and he was flashing unidentified pictures. And I saw one that looked very familiar.
The photo was this, a sketch of a woman listed in the Namus database as an unclaimed body.
So after the training, I went up to him and said, "Can I see your slideshow again?" And he showed me his slideshow, and I mean, it looked just like her.
She rushed to North Carolina, got Angie's mother to do a DNA test, and sent it off to Namus forensic scientists. Weeks later, a match. Authorities found Angie's body near railroad tracks in Richmond, Virginia, days after she went missing in November 1992. Princeton police in North Carolina had her missing persons report. 3 hours away, Virginia officials had her body, but the agencies were never in contact with each other until Namus.
They ruled her death as accidental hypothermia. And then, like I said, by the time we got ready to try to reopen the case, there wasn't enough evidence.
It's stories like hers that inspired North Carolina State Representative Alan McNeil.
The Senate will be in order.
In 2019, lawmakers unanimously voted yes to the bill he sponsored, requiring all law enforcement agencies in the state to enter missing persons cases into Namus after 30 days.
Missing person cases are like any other crime. Time is of the essence.
10 other states have similar laws, but data shows many agencies are not using Namus. The North Carolina Department of Public Safety says about 10,000 missing persons cases are filed each year, but there are only about 400 listed in the Namus database. The FBI reports during 2020, law enforcement entered more than 540,000 missing persons cases into the FBI's national database, but there are only about 20,000 entered into Namus.
I think there are some agencies in the state that are not entering them. Technically, they're breaking the law, but it's a law that has no penalty to it.
Would you consider enacting a law or updating this law to invoke some type of penalty or grading system?
Probably not. I think the court of public opinion should be brought to bear on them.
Many police officers I spoke to say with no added state funding or personnel to help officers with this requirement, it's hard to meet that 30-day deadline. Namus officials say they are staffed primarily to support long-term cases. They recommend, unless someone is endangered, the deadline should be from 180 days to 1 year. His photo was plastered on billboards. Now, nearly 20 years later, Kent Jacobs' disappearance remains a mystery.
It's not easy. I talk to my son almost about every day.
Kent, then 41, disappeared on March 10th, 2002.
He was an adult, but he had probably the mental capacity of 10-year-old.
Somebody destroyed the life of a child. And that's unthinkable, and it's unforgivable.
He was last seen with some of his childhood friends near Hulan Street and Hope Mills, a small town an hour away from Raleigh, North Carolina. In the early 2000s, Larry Trotter was the lead detective on the case.
Where did the case go cold?
I think the case went pretty cold when at one point we had offered like a $10,000 reward. In that world of people that hang around there on Hulan Street, $10,000 is a lot of money. And that $10,000 did not stir anybody.
Because no one close to Kent failed a polygraph test, Trotter believes a stranger could have killed him, making this mystery hard to solve. Then in 2010, Detective Nan Trudgeon took over.
There were some leads that came in,
and one tip rekindled the search. To protect their identities, we've bleeped the names of witnesses.
Another clue that had come in was the fact that went up to and actually said, "Kent's buried on my property in a refrigerator." Well, as I kept searching through to try to find who and what had taken this a little bit further and tried to investigate it, I couldn't find it. So that's what led me to get the search warrant.
She enlisted the help of geologists. They uncovered large metal containers underground on Hulan Street, but still no sign of Kent. Finally, a heavily wooded area needed to be explored.
Our equipment really wasn't well suited for that kind of terrain. Our thoughts were that the only way we can do additional area in there is that they remove some of the vegetation.
Because of the rough landscape, Trudgeon called off the search. Since then, another probe of the property was never conducted.
To the Jacobs family, I'd like to say I'm sorry. I am sorry I could not bring you the closure that you deserve.
Current investigator Lieutenant James Jones says many witnesses have now passed away, and there are several theories as to what happened to Kent. He thinks the key to cracking this cold case could be Namus.
Because of the amount of information they're able to get in from all areas of the country, and that's a big help.
Through Namus, scientists can run Kent's family's DNA against any unidentified body in their database in hopes of a match. It's a chance at granting Martha's last wish.
If it's not till my last breath, the Lord's going to give me an answer.
Felicia Bolton, News Nation.